Hello, my name is Robert McClellan and welcome to the Compression Simplified course. Over the past 20 plus years of working and learning alongside of some of my audio heroes, I've learned a lot about audio compression that I want to share with you. Okay, now let's talk about what you're going to learn in this course, as well as the expectations or the goals that you might have when all is said and done. In this course, you're going to learn how to effectively use compression to be a shaper of transients to make things sound fatter, punchier, or even a little more round if you should so desire. We're also going to learn how to use compression to be a shaper of tones to make your audio sound brighter, darker, more upfront, or even more distant using your compressor alone. We're going to also go through how to use compression to control dynamics. If your bass track, for instance, needs to be heard more consistently, or your vocals need to be more present, or even if you'd like to accentuate the plucking of an acoustic guitar, we're going to cover that. Also, we're going to learn how to properly manage attack and release times so that we can utilize critical listening to set the appropriate attack and release times to achieve a specific goal instead of just turning dials. We're also going to learn how to utilize parallel compression, and by utilizing parallel compression, we can either shape a single track or a group of tracks and blend that in for more punch and clarity. Alright, let's talk about the various types of compressors that we can utilize for shaping your ideal audio track. Knowing the difference between these compressors might help you to grab for the right one at the right time. Because compressors come in various different flavors, these are used by engineers for different tasks, and some sound far better in certain situations than others do. The first one we're going to talk about is VCA compression, or voltage controlled amplifier compressors. These use an integrated circuit which tends to have a very precise control, and they're less collared. Subsequently, they suffer from very few side effects like distortion, which make them ideal for a lot of different tasks. This DBX160 is a VCA compressor. Another form of compression is optocompression. Opto meaning optical, which defines the light-sensitive circuits that control the compression amount in optocompressors. These type of compressors generally react more slowly than other compressor types, and for certain scenarios this can be desirable. The famed Teletronics LA2A is an optical compressor that many producers swear by for vocals and mixed bus compression. It is also a leveling amplifier, which means that it's working nearly all the time, not just when a certain threshold is reached. The next form of compression we're going to speak on is FET compression, or field effect compressors, which use transistors to emulate a valve sound with more reliability, but with a higher signal-to-noise ratio. These are popular for vocals and great for drum compression. The Universal Audio 1176 is a FET compressor. Another popular form of compression is valve compression. Valve compressors work in one of the three ways described in the aforementioned, but they use valves in the amplifier circuit to get that creamy sound. Yet again, the Teletronics LA2A, which is also an optocompressor, uses valves as well. Okay, now having covered some of the main types of compressors that are used, let's talk about some definitions within those compressors. Threshold is how loud the signal has to be before compression is applied. Ratio is how much compression is applied. For example, if the compression ratio is set for 7:1, the input signal will have to cross the threshold by 7 dBs for the output level to increase by 1 dB. The attack time is how quickly the compressor starts to work, whereas the release time is how soon after the signal dips below the threshold that the compressor stops. The knee sets how the compressor reacts to the signal once the threshold is passed. So a hard knee setting means that it clamps the signal right away, and a soft knee setting means that the compression kicks in a little more gently as the signal goes further past that threshold. There's also makeup gain, which allows you to boost the compressed signal, as compression often attenuates the signal significantly and lowering it in volume. And then your output allows you to boost or attenuate the level of the signal from the compressor itself. Okay guys, all the nerdy talk is over now. We've went into the technical aspect of things, we've went into more in-depth of the definitions of things. Now let's actually pull up our tracks and work with these together so we can have real-world examples of how these compressors actually work on an audio track. So fire up that DAW, open that project, and import the files that you've been given in this course, and let's get started. Alright, so now that you have your project uploaded and ready to go, whether it be Cakewalk or the DAW of your choice, and you've uploaded the stems into it, it should look somewhat similar to this. The main thing that we're going to be going through is exactly how a compressor works, so your layout here and your workflow doesn't necessarily have to follow exactly along with the video for you to still get something out of this. let's go to the acoustic guitar track, as this is the track that we're going to use that's going to help us to really understand the controls of the compressor a lot better. And I'm going to show you exactly what I mean by that. Now, when you initially play this acoustic track, you'll notice that it's very low in volume. And I'm going to go ahead and solo that, by the way. We'll listen to this in context with the mix later, but at this particular time, we're just going to work with only this acoustic guitar. So because it's so low in volume, I'm going to go ahead and input an instance of a limiter on the master bus, just so that we can actually hear things a little bit better. And so if you're using Cakewalk, I'll be using the Boost 11, which comes with Cakewalk. It's real simple, easy to use. Okay, that's better. So the reason why I decided to go ahead and use this particular song is because if you're a Cakewalk user, you already have this song in your demo projects folder. You don't even necessarily have to download the Bun project that I've included, or even import stems. So it's a cool thing about this. And also because the guitar for this was very well recorded, and I wanted something to help to show the controls a lot better, and I believe this guitar track is going to do that. So let's go ahead and import an instance of a compressor. Now I'm going to go ahead and just use the Sonatus compressor. This is a stock compressor that comes with Cakewalk by BandLab. However, as I've already talked about in a previous YouTube video, and as you probably already know, almost all compressors have at least these same settings or look very similar to this. Some of them might have some stylistic choices and changes that are specific to that particular developer, but for the most part, they should look and pretty much perform the same. So what we're going to do first is we're going to explain exactly what each one of these things is going to do to the audio source, and I'll explain it before I do it, and then we'll actually hear the real world example, and then you maybe could take time to pause the video and do this yourself, or you could do it along with me if you can multitask. Alright, so we've got our stock compressor loaded now, and these are the default settings that automatically are loaded up. However, with an intimate guitar that we're using right now, these settings don't necessarily make too much sense. So I'm going to turn the limiter option off, as I want to preserve my dynamic range, the loud and the soft parts. I still want that preserved, and because of that, I'm also going to change the ratio. I'm going to set this to something a little more conservative. A 4:1 ratio should do just fine. 15.3 is a bit much. That's a whole lot of attenuation happening after it passes this threshold. So real quickly, let's just explain this ratio one more time. So it's often misunderstood, but compression ratio just simply specifies the amount of attenuation that will be applied to the signal, or the amount of volume loss that will be applied to the signal after it crosses that threshold. And I'm going to set the threshold here in a minute, and you'll see it in action. Now you're going to find that there's a wide range of ratios available depending on the type and the manufacturer of the compressor that you're using. A ratio of 1:1 is the lowest, and therefore it represents unity gain, or in other words, there's going to be no volume loss whatsoever. Now, these compression ratios are expressed in decibels, so that a ratio of 2:1, for instance, indicates that a signal exceeding the threshold by 2 dBs will then be attenuated down to 1 dB above that threshold. So, or if we keep going, a signal that would exceed the threshold if it was on 2:1 by 8 dBs will then be attenuated down 4 dBs above it. So that's where the ratio comes. It's crazy math. I know I hate math, but here it is, staring us right in the face. So the main thing that I want you to take away from this course is not so much all of the in-depth terminologies and not so much all of the technical aspect of things, but I want you to know how to use the tools so that you'll know exactly what you're doing and why you're doing it, and then you can close your eyes, stop, take a breath, and listen and say, does it sound good? Is it helping me, or is it hindering my mix? So let's go ahead and listen to this with a 4:1 ratio with all of the settings currently as they are now. The only thing that we've removed is the limiter, and we've changed the ratio. Now you're going to notice in this area right here, this lets us know how much of that signal is being attenuated. Now, as of right now, regardless of where I set my ratio, regardless of any attack release times, knees, anything, nothing's going to happen to the signal because it's not crossing my threshold. The threshold is also called a ceiling in some places if you read online, but basically as I begin to bring this threshold down, so right now I'm at negative 20 dBs, I'm going to go down to negative 30 dBs. Now we start to see some volume attenuation. Okay, so you can see it in action. You can see this signal here as it's crossing this threshold. It's now being brought down. So the compressor is actually working. So, like I said a minute ago, if I was to set this ratio higher, then that's going to attenuate that level even higher as it crosses that threshold. So let's do that now. If I was to set this at a 6 to 1. Now you're going to see a lot more volume loss. So even on the quieter parts now, I'm getting 2 to 3 extra dBs of gain reduction. Okay, so that explains a little bit better about exactly what ratio is, what it does, and the usage of the threshold. So your threshold is going to be your determining factor on how much compression you're getting, essentially. So yet again, if I was to play this even at a 4 to 1 ratio, which is, like I said, pretty conservative, but I set my threshold even lower, let's say down to negative 42, now I'm getting a ton of gain reduction, even though my ratio is set very low because my threshold is low. So I'm going to set this higher now so that it's just barely kissing that audio signal there. Okay, so now let's move on to attack and release times. In order to better understand what the attack and release times are doing on your compressor, it's best to have a visual representation so that you can actually wrap your head around exactly what's going on. Now, when I use this visual representation for the first time, I seen this in my mind, I started to actually get my head around it. The second I began to use this visual representation, every time I would reach for a knob and turn it, I began to turn things intentionally, finally, for the first time, and I really had like a eureka moment. So I hope this helps you as much as it did me just by being able to visualize this. So let's assume that this here is maybe an acoustic guitar waveform that's been recorded. So I'm going to go ahead and say that this red line right here is my threshold. So as of right now, because of where my threshold is placed, there's no attenuation, no volume loss being happened on this particular waveform, on this particular recording. As I move my threshold down, now I begin to see some peaks that are crossing that threshold. And so these peaks are going to be attenuated based off of whatever my attack and release settings and my ratio settings are. Now my ratio is going to tell me how much is going to be attenuated. My attack and release times is how quickly it's going to be attenuated and how fast it's going to release that audio to get back to its loudness as it was before it was attenuated. Okay, so let's say we have a fast attack and a slow release. So the audio is moving along, the compressor's not doing anything yet, it sees something, and here it is. There's a peak that's crossing that threshold. Because it's a fast attack time, it's going to attack that peak quickly. So in this case, the compressor that we're currently using is set at 15 milliseconds, which is rather fast. So within 15 milliseconds of that passing that threshold, now the compressor is going to turn that signal down based off of whatever our ratio is and our threshold settings. So because I have a fast attack time, it's cutting off the very front portion of this, and if I have a fast release time, it's going to come back up very quickly to where it was at. So it would kind of look like this if you could see only the lines of the compressor itself in action. So if I'm going to do a slow attack time, it would come to about maybe the midpoint. And a slow release time means it would very gradually begin to rise back up to where it was. And so we would have sort of a something like this maybe. So fast attack, fast release, fast attack, slow release, slow attack, fast release. Are you beginning to see what I'm talking about now? Because if you can get this in your head, you'll know exactly what to reach for and why you're reaching for it. So in this instance, if this is an acoustic guitar, one thing that you can do with compression is to actually take care of some of the room noise of an acoustic guitar by utilizing a slow attack time. So for instance, the guitar starts off with a strum here, and as it begins to strum, we notice that there's a transient from that pick that's hitting the strings. And just after it, this trail off right here would be like considered room noise. So if my attack time is slow, it lets the transient go through, and then it only attacks that room noise and turns it down. Now I can adjust my, depending on the source material, which in this case it looks like it's a chug-along guitar. Maybe it's checka 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 checka, like some kind of a, locomotive type sound or something, I don't know. But if I have a faster release, then it's going to come back up to that point and just gradually begin to take care of things there. But essentially, with a slower attack time, I'm going to take care of more of what happens after the transient. Now with a faster attack time, I'm going to take care of the transient itself and let the room noise go. So you have to take that in consideration as well. Now if this was a drum track, for instance, and I wanted to make the snare really pop, let's take a look at maybe just this section alone right here, and let's say that this is a snare hit. So if I wanted to get the snare hit to really pop, I could just simply set my compressor attack and release times to allow only the transient through and let everything else be attenuated. So I would only get the pop off of that snare. Now if I wanted a very reverby, washed out snare sound, I could actually attenuate the hit itself and only let the room noise through. So there's all kinds of options that you can do with attack and release times, and then you can mess with ratios after the fact, and you'll really begin to get a handle on exactly what you're doing. With a visual aid now in mind, we should be able to adjust things based off of that visual aid as far as the attack and release are concerned, and know exactly what we are attacking and what we're releasing. So in this case, I've zoomed into this guitar track that we're working with, and you can see there's several transients here, and just as I showed you, you'll see, especially in this area right here, there's a strum hit, and then you notice a trail off, and that's where that room noise comes from. So by adjusting my attack and release settings properly, I can actually help to take care of some of that room noise. So first, let's go ahead and get a feel for it, and let's see if we can take care of a little bit of that room noise. So you'll notice on my meter over here, because my attack time is so fast, as we just looked at in the visual aid, it's attacking the transients first. So I need to move it farther down so that the transients get through, but the room noise does not. So I'm going to move it to, I don't know, let's start at 75, see how that sounds. Okay, if you have studio monitors or you're listening through a pair of headphones, you should have been able to hear that those transients are coming through a little bit better now, and the room noise is being attenuated a little more. And I think my release time needs to probably be just a little bit longer so that I'm actually clamping down on that room noise just a little bit more. So this here should be pretty close, and then I'll bring my threshold down a little bit more to actually hear it in action. So as you can see, my release time now is a little bit too long. It's not letting the guitar breathe. And that right there is about perfect. Okay, so now we're getting somewhere. We're starting to let those transients of the pick hits come through, and we're taking care of a little bit of that room noise. So if I was to bypass this, you're going to hear, hopefully, you'll be able to hear if you're listening through studio monitors or headphones, exactly what it's doing. Now, if you don't hear it right off the bat, just one thing that I would tell you is just to close your eyes, remove all of the technical aspect yet again from your mind, and just listen. So this is bypassed. And now I'm going to enable. It's very subtle, so please don't be discouraged if you can't hear it right off the bat. This is one of those things that in audio especially, it takes a long time to train your ears to start to hone in on these things and to really hear what exactly they're doing. Now, one thing that I might be able to help you with is I'm going to turn my ratio up even more, and it'll be a little bit more pronounced than what I would do in a mix, generally speaking, but maybe this will help you to better hear exactly what's going on. Okay, so here's what I want you to do. Close your eyes and listen for the body of the guitar. An acoustic guitar has a very distinct body sound that you hear. It's almost like a reverby sound within itself, and it's a ringing sound that comes from the hollow part of the guitar. I want you to listen for that specifically with your eyes closed. I'm going to bypass it first, so at first the compressor will not be kicked in, and then I'm going to enable it maybe 2 seconds into it. So close your eyes, no cheating, close your eyes and listen. So you can hear it right there. That's the breadth, the width of the guitar right there. That's the body sound. Now I'm going to remove that with compression. Listen. Now it's still there, but not quite as much. Okay, I'm going to bypass it again. The body comes back. Enabled. The body disappears a little. So this could definitely be useful in a case where that body of the guitar, it's in a densely populated mix. You don't necessarily need to hear that. You just need to hear the plucking of the strings and the initial transients to help it translate into the mix. This could be very useful for that. Now, on the other side of that, you'll notice that we're now attenuating quite a bit. So this other setting right here, this gain setting, and this knob right here. So this is my gain reduction, which at this point was like 6.2, which is kind of crazy. But yet again, I'm just doing this for the sake of the video. Normally, you would not go this crazy. The key to audio is subtlety. To get great mixes, you got to have subtlety and training your ears to know what's subtle and what's overdone. But this knob right here, or the slider I should say, is my makeup gain. So if I've attenuated the gain by 6 dBs, I'm losing 6 dBs of gain. Now I need to do something to add that gain back because I'm losing it. So if I up this gain reduction now to 3 dBs, I'll gain half of that back. So this is enabled, and this is bypassed. Now, what did you notice? Okay, if you were paying attention and you were listening closely, you'll notice that there was almost no difference. The reason being is because what I just took away through my gain reduction of the compression, I added back in with my makeup gain. Now, how would this be useful? I thought I was wanting to take away that reverb, roomy noise. Well, by doing this, I've essentially controlled the dynamic range. So I've taken the loud part of the transient and I've kept it where I've wanted it to be, and I've attenuated what was once the roomy noise and brought it up to almost meet the point of the transient now. So essentially, it's all on the same level. So if I bring this up to 6 dBs, it should sound as if there's no volume loss between strum and room noise at all. So that's enabled. Gonna bypass. Okay, so from this particular lesson we can learn that if I wanted to, like let's say for instance this was a singer-songwriter and I wanted that guitar to really shine, maybe it was just him and a vocal, his guitar and a vocal, then in this case that would be very pleasing because now I have the full rich embodiment of the guitar, all of it being heard at the same consistency of the volume levels. So therefore I've controlled the dynamic range of this particular acoustic guitar to make it sound as if I was almost in the same room with that person. Is that not awesome? And that's what a compressor can help you do. Yet again, this is kind of overdone from what I would normally do. I think if I put this back down to a ratio of 4, my makeup gain is going to change, so I'm going to have to set that about right here. That'll sound a little more natural to your ears. Let me bypass. Okay, so this is part of the tone shaping that I was talking about as well in the introduction of this course. So you'll notice that the guitar sounds almost more distant, and it sounds almost like it's like you're kind of listening to the person. If you're sitting behind them, you're studying, you're looking at your books, and they're sitting behind you in the other room with the guitar facing away from you. When I enable the compressor, however, it's almost like the roles are reversed. You're now turned around and they've turned around, the guitar's facing you. Just listen for one moment, you'll be able to hear this. So it's in bypass mode right now, the guitar's facing away from you. And now I'm going to enable it and he's going to turn around. doesn't want to play for you anymore, he turns back around. So this is essentially also how you can create depth in your mix by using a compressor, because our ears naturally will perceive things that sound as if they're farther away as being farther away. Even though the audio itself is recorded in one spot, one solitary spot, nothing's changed, the microphone placement hasn't changed during the whole time that it's been recording, by allowing the compressor to do the work after the fact, or even before the fact, if you have a hardware that you're running through, you can get that guitar to sound either more distant or closer just by using these simple settings on your compressor. Let's hear this compressor now with the current settings that we've got it set to in context with the mix. Although this mix, quote unquote, isn't so much of a mix as it is more or less just a starting point, sort of a rough mix if you want to call it that. But let's hear what the compressor adds to it in lieu of everything else.
Fading and we're fading fast. What happened to same page? What happened to making it last? You don't want no tie down. You don't need no set sound. When
Okay, so right here is a great example during this portion of the song where the compressor really is going to shine. Without the compressor, listen, the guitar will almost get lost in the mix.
You don't want no tie down. You don't need no set
Still hear a little bit of it, but it's kind of
when
buried.
6 months into spite. Just hand me your heart now. I promise we won't fall down. Just trust us, living for now.
Now granted, there was some volume increase from that too. So the best case scenario is to volume match your before and your after. So in this particular instance, if I was to go back, let's just go ahead and loop that particular area.
We're fading and we're fading fast. What happened to same page? What happened to making it last? You don't want no tie down. You don't need no set sound. When 6 months
Okay, so it looks like
into spite.
with the compressor,
What happened to
20,
same
hang
page?
on a minute.
What happened to making it last? You don't want no tie down. You
Without, I'm
don't
at
need no
-18.
set sound.
So it's about 2 dBs.
When 6 months into spite. What happened to same page? What happened to making it last? You don't want no tie down. You don't need no set sound. When 6
So as you can see, by raising the volume up 2 dBs, I still get more of the guitar in that area where it's trying to be drowned out, but it's the compressor that helps it to shine through, and the reason being is because it's actually leveling out the entire signal itself. So the loud parts are being brought down, the quiet parts are being brought up, and you're hearing it more consistently, which is what a compressor is supposed to do. It's controlling the dynamic range. By simply turning the volume up, I'm only hearing those loud parts louder and the quiet parts louder. But it's not doing anything to help my ears adjust to what's happening. So the compressor, although it's only like 2 dBs of extra gain is actually
We're
making
fading in
it
work,
so much better.
fading fast. What happened to same page? What happened to making it last? You don't want no tie down. You don't need no set sounds. When 6 months hits the spot.
So listen for, sort of like in the snare, there's like ghost notes. There's almost like ghost notes on the guitar. It's the in-between transient strums that you begin to hear a whole lot better. And I think I can probably just get to that section like right, wish I could quit moving it, hello, right here.
You don't want no tie down. You don't want no tie down. You don't.
See, it's buried without
Don't
the
want no
compressor.
tie down. You don't.
Turn it on,
Don't want no tie down. You don't.
and it brings it up to a point where you can actually hear it. It helps to add back to the mix again. As a mix engineer, we are to properly identify what the most important elements of the mix are that will help to carry the song. In this instance, it's got to be always, usually is, the lead vocal. It comes first and foremost, unless it's some kind of a dance track or a beat, something of that nature where it doesn't have a vocal, or the vocal is supposed to purposely be buried. In this case, that's not the case, so the lead vocal has got to be the very top priority, as well as, coming in with a close second, the acoustic guitar. So now that we've got the acoustic guitar to a place to where it's starting to shine in the mix, let's go ahead and begin to work on the vocal using a compressor as well. Yet again, we're going to load our Cakewalk Sonotest compressor. Here's the default settings that come up as usual. And this time, we're going to start with, yet again, a 4-to-1. It's kind of generally my starting point anyway. I just like to start with a 4-to-1 and then move it up or down based off of whatever I hear. So I'm going to go ahead and start this here. And with a vocal, you're not necessarily wanting to cut off too much of the transients unless it's like a rap style vocal or something where you're wanting to actually control the dynamics incredibly. But generally speaking, you want to let those moments where they're singing that first line come through a little bit better. All you're wanting to mainly do is just bring up those quieter parts. So a quick attack time would not necessarily work because now I'm going to be cutting off transients. So a slower attack time is also not only going to help, but it's going to sound more natural. So I'm going to go with the default settings right here and just see what I've got.
Autumn wraps us up tighter than we were prepared for. But we don't need to let it spin out. We can grasp every moment and walk off our doubts. And I wanna give this a try. I see where you're coming from, but open your eyes. We're fading and we're fading fast. What happened to same page? What happened to making it last? You don't want no tie down. You don't need no set sounds. When 6 months hits the spot, just hand me your heart now. I promise we won't fall down. Just trust us, a living for now.
Okay, so if you were following along on the screen with what I was doing, I actually like that attack time. It sounds very natural. It's still taking care of a lot of the noise that might be coming from the trail off of the vocal, but by having a faster release time, I noticed that it's actually allowing more of the soul to come through. You'll notice at the end of some of those phrases, she's really got this quiver that just sounds absolutely beautiful, and you don't want to cut that off. So by having a quicker release time, we're still taking care of some issues as far as the dynamic range. As you can see, it's very dynamic. There's loud, quiet, loud, quiet, which is good. It sounds great, but I want to just even that out more without crushing the soul of the song itself. So with just a few moves on 2 compressors, we've already added tremendous production value to this song. If I was to disable these, the song in itself still sounds really good.
Autumn wraps us up
But when I put these compressors in,
tighter
production
than
value
we
seems
were
to
prepared for. But we don't need to let it spin.
They just sound as if they're recorded better. They sound as if the rooms that they were recorded in were better. Just everything about them just makes them sound more polished, clean, and professional, which is what we want to achieve. The other thing that seems to shine in this is the bass track, but yet because of where it sets in the mix, it's not shining like it should, I don't feel. So let's add another instance of a compressor on the bass track, and the only thing that we're going to really be doing to the bass is just making it sound a little more present all the time. So I'm going to leave the limiter button on, and I'm going to set my ratio to something actually rather high. So in a sense, I'm going to be using this like a limiter, but with the same settings as a compressor, so it should make it a little bit more dynamic without completely crushing it. Let's take a listen to see what exactly we can do here.
You don't want no tight down, you don't need no set sounds. When 6 months hits us by, just hand me your heart now. I promise we won't fall down. Just trust us, living for now.
Okay, I'm going to bring this release time down so that I can get more of the...
And I've never met a guy as gentle or real as you are. A guy much more deeper than most, who sees color in everything and feels sound through his bones. So I thought you believed in.
Okay, so what that allowed was more of the transients to come through and more of the ending part of a note, that trail of the bass that makes it really kind of the groove of it, which really kind of draws you into the song. I feel at times it helps it to be more accentuated. So essentially, yet again, we've only used 3 compressors, some very quick moves with this. I just made sure that the limiter was on so that it would act more like a limiter. I brought my threshold very high. That way the attenuation, the dynamic range would be a lot more controlled. In other words, the high points and the low points would be almost even. However, they're not. They're still very dynamic, but for a bass. And for bass tracks especially, you can actually have very high ratios and still get some pleasing results. I've set my attack very high to allow that transient boom, 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 boom to come through, and my release is very fast to allow the tail end of that boom, da boom, 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 where it sounds very natural. So let's go ahead and take a listen. 3 compressors, very quick settings.
You don't want no tight down, you don't need no set sounds. When 6 months hits us by, just hand me your heart now. I promise we won't fall down. Just trust us, living for now.
Okay, let's disable those.
And I've never met a guy
And now let's enable the compressors.
gentle, real as you are. A guy much more deeper than most, who sees color in everything and feels sound through his bones. So I thought you believed in meant to be's and chances, but I guess I'm wrong. I guess it's gone. Should've dropped you
So just but a few moves of the compressor, reaching intentionally to do things that need to be done. We've made the bass sound closer, more up front by allowing that bass transient to come through so it feels as if the bass is facing us. Yet again, all intentional settings. We've done it with the use of a compressor, and you can too. Alright, so moving on to the final phase of compression that you'll be taught in this specific course, we're going to talk now about sidechain compression. This is something that you can use for stylistic reasons, whether it's a pumping bass line for a dance track, or in this case we're going to use it to actually accentuate the kick and to make it poke through a mix a little bit better. Now when it comes to low-end information, you've always got the kick and the bass battling one another simply because they're both usually panned right in the center, and they're also both inhabiting the same low-end frequencies. So one way that you can combat this by using compression is by setting up your compression for sidechaining. I'll show you exactly how to do this. Once you learn this little trick, you can utilize it for many other things other than just kick and bass as well. So here we go. Alright, so the first thing that we need to do is actually accentuate the kick in this drum track so that we get it to sound like we want using the compressor and the same principles that we've already learned in the previous portions of this tutorial. So let's go ahead and pull up the compressor. I'm going to start with a pretty high ratio because the kick is rather loud, and I'm just going to go ahead and drop this down, turn this off, and now if I want the kick to stand out, what I'm going to want to do is allow the initial transient to go through, shave off a lot of the after effect, like the ring that happens after the kick happens. So a higher release time will allow me to shave that off, and a shorter attack time, if I set it up properly, will allow me to only get that transient to come through. These little spikes right here in the audio is where the kick is actually happening. I'm going to solo that and try to dial this in a little bit closer. Okay, that sounds pretty good to my ears. This is the before and the after. It makes the kick sound a little more punchy, which is what I was going after. So now that I have the kick in a place where I feel like it sounds the way that I want it to, I want to use that kick to actually trigger the compressor on the bass track, so that every time the kick goes off, it will duck the bass underneath the kick just enough for the kick to poke through. You're still going to hear the bass line, but you're going to hear the kick accentuate just a little bit above the bass line, so that at the same time that the bass hits, the kick will hit, and you'll hear the snap of the kick more so than the pluck of the bass. So I'm going to show you how to do that now. In order to achieve this, I have to insert another instance of a compressor on the bass track. This compressor will act as a receiver of sorts from the send that I'm going to give it, which will come from the drum track, which will be sort of our transmitter. In order to get the signal to transmit from the drum track into this compressor to tell it to turn the bass down when the kick goes off, I simply just need to create a send to that compressor. In this instance, it has side compressor, side input bass, side compressor 1, side input bass. Because it has a number allocated next to it, I know that's actually the second instance, although it does have a 1 next to it. That is the second instance of the compressor that's actually on that bass track. So I'll create that send, and we'll see that here. Now if I was to unmute the bass track and this drum track together, I'll loop the same section that we just used to get our kick sounding good, and I'll bring up this particular compressor here. So now that this is routed the way that it is, you'll be able to see when I open up this instance of the compressor, which is the one that's been sidechained, it's only picking up the drums and not the bass itself. And if you have the Sonotest compressor by Cakewalk, then you can actually click this button here and hear only the side chain, what it's actually picking up, and you'll know for sure exactly what it is. So I can tell from this, it's definitely only picking up exactly what it needs to pick up. I'll switch this back to audio now, and I will use this send and this compressor together to create the ducking. Now, because essentially all I'm wanting this to do is to duck, I can actually set my attack times very fast. I'll even set this one to, let's say, just 12. And we'll set the release time very fast as well. We'll set this to 20. So as you can see, it's causing the bass to duck down every time that kick goes off by 6 dBs, allowing the kick to come through, and it releases so fast that it's almost not even perceivable by the ear that that's even happening. But you can definitely hear it in context of the mix if I was to remove this sidechain effect. So I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about now in context with the mix. Let's turn off the send, or actually let's just turn off the compressor. And let's take a listen. So as you can hear, the kick and the bass are fighting one another. Now if I was to turn this back on, and the sidechain is now enabled, now listen to what it sounds like. So as you can see, it makes the kick poke out just ever so slightly. A lot more than what it was, but I'll remove it once again. Okay, yet again, if you're listening on studio headphones or monitors, you'll be able to hear this a lot easier. I've done this subtly, as I would if I was mixing. Let me accentuate it now incredibly so you can really hear this taking place. So before, now, as you can hear, if it's done overdone, it actually takes away the punchiness of the bass. So if it's done right, it will almost, the kick and the bass will almost blend together so nicely that they'll sound like they're one initial hit. But because you're accentuating the kick, it sounds punchier than just the bass. Usually it's a round sound of a boom, 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 whereas the kick is like a t. Whenever you put that together, you have that punchy, well-rounded sound that you have in a lot of the professional recordings, and it was all done by sidechain compression. Now, I've also done this in other songs where I've sidechained an entire choir to the lead vocal, so that as the choir was singing, when the lead vocal comes in, all of the choir members would duck just below the lead voice, at least by 3 or 4 dBs, giving them room to actually be heard. And then whenever they quit singing, the choir would come back up slowly, and there would be no perception to the ear that it even happened. It just all blended well together. Okay, so by utilizing the tool of compression, we have been able to get a vocal to be a little bit more consistent and to sound more polished and professional. We've also got an acoustic guitar by utilizing attack and release times to deal with a little bit of the room noise to sound more consistent and also to blend in and to stand out at the same time. We've also used compression on the bass to get it to be a little bit more present, and we've utilized parallel compression or sidechain compression with the bass and the drums together to make sure that the kick drum was coming through like it should. Now when we go into the mixing phase of this, things are going to be a lot easier. We can sit down and really begin to deal with things because we've got the foundational tracks already dealt with: vocals, acoustic guitar, bass, and drums. I hope this course has been helpful. I hope that you've really learned something from it. If you have not, please let me know. And if you have, please let me know. In fact, for everyone who sends me a review, whether it's through email and lets me know their thoughts on the course, or if you even post it to the page publicly, whether it be good or bad, I'm not saying you have to leave me a good review. I actually want honest feedback. So if it's good or it's bad feedback, whatever it might be, for everyone who leaves me some sort of feedback, you will get 50% off of my next course that I will be releasing. And as of right now, I'm working on a course that's called Mixing Simplified, where I'll actually take a song from scratch and mix it, show you every single move that I'm doing, why I'm doing that move, every single plugin instance that I'm using, and then we'll go from something that was just raw tracks into a finished, polished mix. So when I go to release that course, then you will automatically get 50% off that course just for simply giving me some feedback. So until next time, just remember that music is not meant to be as technical as it is emotional, heard and felt, rather than tweaked with knobs. Take this information that you've just gathered about compression and apply it to any compressor that you have, and go and make some awesome music. Real quickly, I just want to give a shout out to Sophia Jane, who allowed me the usage of her song. I emailed her and she so graciously said, yes, absolutely, use it for your tutorial. So thank you, Sophia, for allowing me to use your wonderful song. It's a beautiful song and it worked out perfectly for this particular tutorial. I didn't even have to switch back and forth between songs. I had everything that I needed in this one song, and it made it easier on everybody involved. So go and check her out, sophiajanemusic.com. And she also has a Facebook page here at Sophia Jane Music. Go and check her out, give her a like, give her a follow, let her know that you appreciate the song as well.